Hello. Well, Sundance is over, and I'm here to talk to you about the movies that I watched. Sundance 2025. Sadly, I only watched two, and through the virtual festival, but they were good ones, and both of them hit really, really close to home for me. So, without further ado, let's start with the first one, which was Plainclothes. This was a film by first-time director Carmen Emmy. Plainclothes is about a undercover police officer who sets up sting operations to lure gay men into restrooms in order to make arrests, um, all the while struggling with his own sexual identity. Um, this one hit really close to home for me, as I mentioned before, because I struggled with my sexuality my entire life. I grew up very religious in a conservative area with conservative people around me. So it was something that I held down through most of my life. It wasn't until my late 30s, I'm 40 now, my late 30s, that I finally came to terms with the truth about myself. I'd always felt it and I'd always kind of struggled with it, but I always had an excuse for it. And I could always point to, well, I'm attracted to women. The truth is, I'm pansexual, and that's something that I couldn't ever put a pin on or didn't want to ever put a pin on. Once I was able to put a name to it, it's like a weight lifted off of me. Suddenly, I felt like the person I was, and you know, I had no need to cruise like the guys in this movie show. You know, even people who I had no reason for the hookups. Like this officer in this movie falls in love with one of the people that he originally was supposed to be setting up for an arrest, and you know, that part I don't necessarily connect to, because even though I'm happily married, I've been happily married for 14 years, and I have no intention of changing that, despite what I've kind of come to terms with about myself. That changes nothing about who I am and where my life is. For someone like this, who has been struggling for so long and is finally realizing it and is in a place where they can act upon something like that, or has the desire to, it makes for a very, very compelling film, and very compelling story that Carmen Emmy has crafted here. It operates like a coming of age film, which is very, very interesting, considering the subject of the film is in his late 20s, I believe, almost 30. um, and it's very interesting, and it's something that I can understand. As I mentioned, like, when you figure out a thing about yourself, it's like you are discovering who you are. It's like a moment of clarity. It is a coming of age moment, because a lot of people have that moment well earlier than you do, than you get to. And so it operates much like a coming of age film for this guy. I mean, you do kind of, it does flash back to his childhood a little bit, not in the sense of like you get scenes with him as a child or anything, but um, there's this really cool aspect of the movie that when you are kind of seeing through his eyes, not necessarily his perspective, but um, seeing kind of what's going on in his mind. It's all being shot with a handheld high 8 camcorder, which, number one, because this is set in the 90s, is very very cool and very on theme. But also, it's one of the best depictions of anxiety I've ever seen in a film. Up until now, it was in Iron Man 3, when he has a panic attack and goes to Jarvis, is like, Jarvis, what's wrong with me? Is it my heart? And Jarvis is like, there's nothing wrong with you. And he can't really get a grasp on that there's nothing wrong with him. That feels exactly like what a panic attack feels like. They got that perfectly. And then the scene in Inside Out 2, with the panic attack, where anxiety is running the show. That scene had me head in hands in the theater bawling, like, because that is exactly how I feel, because I suffer from anxiety. I suffer from pretty severe anxiety. So seeing when it's done properly on film and I feel seen, it feels very good. Now, I mean, not necessarily like comforting, maybe a little comforting. It's not necessarily that I enjoy seeing others having this anxiety feeling, but there is a comfort knowing that I am seen and that other people can see it. So that's another way that this film really hit home for me. But yeah, the handheld high eight camcorder shots, you get a couple of shots of him when he's a kid, when he's in that situation, and that's what I mean by you get a little bit of the kid, but that's not really where the coming of age portion comes in. It's really like how this aspect kind of changes the way he faces the world and the way that he lives in his own society, which is really what coming of age movies do best, is showing someone who is learning to be part of their own society. And that's absolutely what this does. It changes his dynamic with his family. It changes his dynamic with his work. It changes his dynamic in his relationships. It's very very well told and well represented film about coming to terms with yourself. Tom Blythe is an actor I had never seen anything from. I know he was in the new Hunger Games movie recently, but I didn't see that movie. So I had never seen him. I didn't know anything about him. But let me tell you, he's incredible in this role. Every emotion that is asked of him for this film, he wears perfectly on his face. He wears perfectly in his performance. He wears absolutely perfectly. I absolutely felt a kinship to him throughout this. I felt that I understood exactly where he was and what he was going through. And again, part of that is from my own experience, and part of that is he was incredible in this role. Russell Tovey is marvelous. To me, he has always been Alonzo from Doctor Who. Allons-y, Alonzo. Seeing him in this role was very interesting, because there was a familiarity about him, because again, to me, he is this kind of actor, and I've seen him in other things, but Doctor Who is a comfort thing for me. So this guy who to me is represents this comfort thing to me, seeing him kind of play both the comfort person and the cause of the anxiety for our Cypher in the film, and especially Cypher for me, because I understand the experience, was really affecting for me. And again, Russell Tovey is really, really great in this film. You really believe the chemistry that him and Tom Blythe have. And I'm already going to call it right now, the biggest snub of 2026, the 2026 Oscar nominations announcement, is definitely going to be Maria Dizia for Best Supporting Actress. She plays Tom Blythe's mother in this movie, and she's absolutely incredible. She's a wonder on screen. This film works well on its own merits, but it is incredibly elevated by its supporting performances, including Maria Dizia, who gives one of my recent favorite mom performances. And I'm a big fan of mom performances because I grew up with just my mother, and so a great mother performance. And not that she's a great mother, because there's a lot that happens in this movie that kind of makes you question that a little bit. But when you get a really great mom performance that makes you feel like you can understand how she feels, like you can feel the love that she feels for her child, and the emotion that comes with the mother-son relationship. That their maternal chemistry is really, really good, and again, was a thing that brought me a little bit of comfort, because I lost my mom several years ago. And so when I see that on screen, even if it isn't a perfect relationship like theirs isn't, it's really valuable for me. Carmen Emmy is a director that I look forward to seeing more work of in the future. If this is any indication, his first feature is any indication, I think that we're going to see a lot from him. We're going to see some great things from him. Let's get that sophomore movie out of the way. Sometimes that's a difficult one for a director, that sophomore feature. If you want to hear about more sophomore features, look at my week 4 of 5225, 52 weeks of loving movies. I talked about director's second and fifth films, but that's a shameless plug. So yeah, all that said, I really, really, really liked this movie. It spoke to me in a lot of ways and hit very, very close to home. But even outside of that, I think that even if this doesn't speak to you, I think it's going to. It doesn't speak to you on a personal level, like you've experienced it. I think it is going to be a movie that is going to people are going to find value in. I recommend it for anybody who wants a thriller turned romance turned coming of age film because it delivers on all of those fronts. The other film I watched at Sundance 2025 is Omaha from another first time director, Stephen Cole Webley. Well, it's his first feature. He has made short films, but this is his first feature. And once again, with the first time directors just knocking it out of the park because he did again, not to show my cards too early, but this guy knocks it out of the park as well. Omaha is about a dad facing the 2008 economic recession, has to leave his house with his children, and they go on a road trip with very, very little funds and kind of navigating what it's like to be a very, very poor parent. This one hits very close to home for me as well, because I grew up in a single parent home where we had very little money, and watching these kids in this movie interact with the dad who is just struggling with all of this stuff while they get to just be kids, but just be kids who kind of have to grow up a little bit sooner than they should have had to, because that's something that I definitely experienced. Watching them do that is like watching my own childhood from the outside. It was really an interesting experience for me seeing that on screen. But being a father, I also am seeing the struggle that the dad, who gets a name later in the movie, but is mostly just referred to as dad, the dad is going through. But also on a third front, I get to see what my mother must have been going through for all those years. And it's going to make me cry a little bit. This is the second time I've talked to my mom. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry, dear viewer. When you are very, very poor and you're a parent, you have to do everything you can to make sure your child is taken care of. Sometimes it's very, very hard to do. And sometimes you have to make sacrifices, which we see in this film. We see this dad having to make sacrifices, or even doing things that maybe are outside of the best interest of everyone just to make sure the kids get a little bit of joy in their lives. And that's what he does. And it is a reflection of what I saw with my mother. My mom, even though we were very, very poor, she was working 3 jobs. We lived in government housing or low income housing. We didn't have much. We didn't even have cable. But every Friday, my mom would go to Pizza Hut, order a Bigfoot pizza, which they don't make anymore at Pizza Hut. But it was a long pizza. She'd get a Bigfoot pizza. She'd go to the video store, pick out. We would all go to the video store. She'd pick out a movie, and we'd each get to pick out a movie. And then we'd go home and watch them. And I'd watch Terminator 2 again, probably. And I'd watch it the next morning, or whatever movie we got. I'd usually watch it that night and then the next morning. But those were the little sacrifices that my mom had to make in order to make sure that, even though it probably wasn't economically the best choice in terms of making sure that we stayed on our feet, it was important to make sure that her kids were having a childhood and had some form of joy in their lives, which is something we see in this film, and it's something that really, really resonated with me. I was 24 in 2008 when the economic recession hit, and so I was affected by it, but also I didn't have kids. I didn't have a family yet. I have a family now, but we're in a much better place now, economically. I was in a stable area and I had a stable job. So I am very, very fortunate to not have had to experience what this fictional family and many, many, many families, real families, had to endure during that time. John Magaro will break your heart in this movie. He broke my heart. He also filled me with an empathetic rage at times, which is which may be an expression, but it feels like one I just made up to describe how I felt at him at some point in these times, because it's a type of rage that is justified, but also I have an empathy for it because I understand. I've been there. I understand what's going on. I understand because the film has told me so well what this guy is going through. The kids also, Molly Bell Wright and Wyatt Solace, were incredible. I have not seen a child performance that good in a little while. I'm not gonna. Okay, I don't think I have. I'm sure I've seen some. I've seen some really great child performances, and I really love some really great child performances. I think After Sun. Uh, I forget her name. Frankie something. Oh God, tell me in the comments, Dylan. You're watching this. Tell me in the comments the name of the person of the actress in After Sun, and I will have already looked it up and know, but I need you to tell me now. But it's some of the best child acting I've seen in the walls, particularly from Molly Bell Wright. She plays a child who's had to grow up a little bit too soon, but also has the mindset of a child. She breaks your heart too. Anytime there are times in this movie where she takes the blame for things that are not her fault. But she feels like because she's had to grow up that that she has a responsibility that is not due her. She is not meant to have this responsibility, but she feels like she does. But I don't want to go too far into kind of what some of these things are, because the journey of this, it's a road trip movie. So, it's the journey, not the destination, is very true here. I mean, you kind of want to let everything unfold. So when you get to these moments, they have the biggest impact. So I'm not going to go too far into what it is about these things that really hit me or touch me. But I do want to recommend this one to anyone who has the heart to hear the story of a desperate person. To anybody who wants to see what it's like for people who are underprivileged, and not to get too political or whatever, but and these are the underprivileged white people. There are movies out there for to see what it's like for underprivileged minorities, and you should absolutely seek those out. But if you just want to see kind of a snapshot of what it was like during that time for underprivileged people, or really what it's been like in history for underprivileged families like I was, I highly recommend it to those people. I really hope that this gets traction once it is distributed wide, because I think it is something special, and it's something that I hope we are talking about for a long time. Did you watch either of these movies at Sundance? Are you excited to see any of these movies if you didn't see them? Did you see movies at Sundance? What did you see? What did you love? Tell me. Talk to me in the comments.